Good morning or afternoon, my friends out there on the video blog. I have been doing a lot of political ones, but now I'm going very literary on you, very intellectual, but wonderfully so. You'll be very grateful to me by the time this is over. I just finished a book called Secret City, The Hidden History of Gay Washington, by James Kirchick. And I could not put it down. I binge read it. I have to be honest with you, Jay. When I first heard the title, I was going, oh, not one of these confidential type books. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, brothers and sisters, this book is the caliber of the nonfiction writers like Doris Kearns Goodwin, James Robert Caro, who did the Lyndon Johnson biographies, even Barbara Tuchman, who I'm a huge fan of. It's readable, it's chock full of history. And for me personally, it was somewhat personally disturbing because it took me back, and I was born in 1946, and I suddenly realized why I was so fucked up for so many years, what I was receiving through the press, and what the only stories I would hear about being a gay man. James is a senior fellow at Atlantic Institute and graduate of Yale. He's had written for almost every major publication and paper that I can name, too numerous to name. George Stephanopoulos is a big fan of this book. He called it an extraordinary achievement. He also said Secret City is not a gay history, but American history. And I know George, and I know he's not easy. So that's high praise, James. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, David, and such an honor to converse with you. And I learned so much interviewing you for this book. I'm very happy to talk about it with you.
Well, I'm thrilled, and let me show the cover. So you're going to. I will have a link in the description of the blog where you can order this on Amazon. James, why'd you write it?
Well, I've always been interested in American history and political history, the history of presidents, the history of the Cold War, internationally and domestic. And I'm a gay person. And the more I was reading about this and living in Washington, working as a journalist, I realized that Washington is a city that runs on secrets, that secrets are really the form of currency in Washington. And I had this realization that there was no more powerful or dangerous secret in this period of time, really World War II to the end of the Cold War. There was no more dangerous secret than being gay. And so that seemed to me like a fascinating prism through which to really re-examine all this history, from FDR to Bill Clinton, the history of the CIA, the FBI, the civil rights movement, the conservative movement, McCarthyism, all these phenomena and individuals and personalities and characters, they all had some relationship to homosexuality. And so I realized that no one had put this all together in a book before. There are a handful of books on, elements of it, right? There's a very good book about the Lavender Scare. There's a very good biography of Frank Kameny, the gay activist. But really, aside from just a handful of these books, there was no sort of, sweeping Robert Caro-esque. And I'm very honored that you would compare me to him, because his books, his books on Johnson were really my model. I was reading his books while writing my own, just to kind of capture that flavor of the way he writes and the way he is able to take all this information and put it together. I mean, he was really the model, and no one had done that with the gay experience.
The praise about Robert Caro is richly deserved. He's one of my favorite writers, as is Doris Kearns Goodwin. This is such a readable book. It's a large book, but don't be discouraged by that. It's so readable. You're a great storyteller.
Thank you.
One of the things that struck me, James, was I thought I knew everything. I've read so many gay histories, and I've read so many books about our LGBTQ plus community, and I've lived a lot of it.
Yeah.
Lived a lot of it. I was born in 1946. There were times I was shocked at people who I viewed as liberal heroes, such as a situation in the book where you describe her, Ava Harriman, congratulating someone for being so vehemently anti-gay. And that's one of the things, the secrets is not only about who was gay and what they went through. The secrets are how major leaders, presidents, and people responded to the secrets. That was the astounding thing to me, time and time again. And I said, oh my God, that is the most homophobic thing that he could have written. And it was people who I had admired and respected. Were you shocked by anything that you found?
I was too. For instance, the first outing in American history that I write about was Senator David Walsh from Massachusetts, who was a conservative Democrat and a real critic of FDR. And in 1942, he was accused by the New York Post, which, as hard as it might be for people to imagine, in 1942, the New York Post was a liberal newspaper.
Most of the country.
Yeah, it was not only a liberal newspaper; it was the newspaper of the liberal intelligentsia, of the pro New Deal, pro FDR wing of the Democratic Party. They accused David Walsh of frequenting a brothel in Brooklyn, right near the Navy Yard, that was also patronized by Nazi spies. And it turned out the story wasn't true. It was a case of mistaken identity. Walsh probably was gay, but he was not the person who was named in this. He wasn't actually at this location. But this story was pushed by the New York Post. The guy who was really at the center of it was a man named Morris Ernst, who was the general counsel of the New York Post. He was also the general counsel of the American Civil Liberties Union. And FDR was kind of quietly supporting this outing because he didn't like Walsh. Walsh was an adversary. And then one more thing, you know, when Frank Kameny, who's really, I think, the hero of the book, when he decided to sue the federal government for being fired for being gay, he couldn't even get the ACLU to support his case. And I'm not saying this to attack liberals or the ACLU. I just think it's important that we understand how lonely the American homosexual was in this period of time. There was literally no one willing to support you. So when I think of what it took for people like Frank Kameny and yourself and other people from this generation to do what they did, to come out of the closet and say, I'm not wrong, I'm not screwed up, society is screwed up, at a time when the medical establishment, the media, the government, organized religion, every sector of society is condemning gay people as sinful, depraved, criminals, maniacs, pedophiles. To have the courage and the wherewithal and the intellectual independence to say, I'm not sick, you're sick. That, to me, that's why I wrote this book.
It is true, and Frank Kameny deserves to be the hero of this book. Kameny, I'm a huge fan of what he did, and he inspired me to do a lot of my work. He's someone that we should not ever forget in this community.
Absolutely.
Society and the Daughters of Bilitis. What struck me was how few straight allies spoke. I mean, in times of major scandals, it was more important to say you were not gay than not communist.
Yeah.
People defended the communists more than the gays. And when I read in one part of your book, when I think it was John Kennedy, but when he was inaugurated, not under his knowledge, because he was more sympathetic than almost any other president that you wrote about. He just didn't care. And he had a gay friend. It's important for me to know. 64 people were fired in the State Department. I think I have that number right.
Sure,
The Kennedy administration for being a homosexual. And he was the most enlightened one in the book of the presidents. Quick question. You didn't write much about Harry Truman.
I should say Harry Truman is my favorite president. He won World War II. He desegregated the military. He recognized the state of Israel. He built NATO and basically the post-World War II liberal international order. And he was a homespun regular guy. He wasn't college educated. I love Harry Truman. He's my favorite president. And I'll say part of writing this book was like you. It was a little disappointing because, you know, I thought Ike was a great president and a great American, right? But really, no president that I write about comes out unscathed in this book, right? They're all presiding over what Christopher Isherwood referred to as the heterosexual dictatorship, because that's what it was like to be a gay person in America, particularly in Washington, right, where this secrecy is so pervasive and the security state is so oppressive, that to be a gay man, a gay person, but a gay man in particular, because gay male sexuality was much more heavily policed and surveilled by law enforcement. Just because gay men were, looking for sex in ways that lesbians weren't, right? They were coming into conflict with the law in a more severe way. It was like being a gay person in Washington. It was like being a dissident in a East communist police state, So Harry Truman doesn't come up by name that much, I think, only because he's sort of in this interesting period where there was no, he didn't have, to my knowledge, a close gay friend or an advisor like, say, FDR did with Sumner Wells, whose story really dominates the first 4 chapters of the book. And then under Eisenhower is when the Lavender Scare really begins in earnest. So, Harry Truman, he's kind of in between. It's when it's starting, the Lavender Scare is starting in the Truman administration, but he doesn't have any kind of personal connections with gay people in the way that FDR did, or Eisenhower has one of his top advisors, Arthur Vandenberg Jr., which is a very tragic story that I tell. So that's the reason, even though Truman is my favorite president, and I was obviously disappointed by him in the sense that the Lavender Scare really began under Truman, he doesn't factor in as much as the other presidents.
It's a book about some of the most best and brightest minds in the country, in the State Department, in international relations, literally being driven from their positions with no defenders.
Yeah.
And their only crime was wanting to serve their country.
Yeah.
It is shocking how no one came to their defense. I mean, there were rallies in the streets for when people were accused of being a communist.
Yeah.
But it was perceived by everyone, it was appropriate to purge the institutions of governments of anyone who was LGBTQ.
Yeah, and it's why I say that I think this was actually worse than the Red Scare, because the Red Scare, while obviously it went too far and there was hysteria and fear, we were right to be afraid of communism. Communism was an evil ideology, and there were a handful of communists in the government, certainly not nearly as many as Joe McCarthy was alleging, but there was a basis to this. There was no basis whatsoever to the Lavender Scare or to the fear of gay people in government. Not a single person was found to be a traitor who was gay. In terms of that they were blackmailed into giving information to a foreign power. So the entire justification, the entire rationale for the Lavender Scare was without merit. And there were as many, if not more, victims of it than there were of the Red Scare. So I think that it's a more shameful period of American history than the Red Scare.
In the 60s, when I was starting to go to gay bars, I'm aging myself here. There was a bar across the street from the FBI that you write about, down in the basement. And, I was warned when I went there that if I would take a drink in my hand and move around the room, I could be charged for solicitation, that the room was undercover. And there was all these unwritten rules that you had to follow. A buzzer to alert you that someone who was undercover was in the crowd.
Yeah.
It was such a constant atmosphere of fear. And when I didn't know how to find a gay bar, I went to the Mattachine Society office in Washington. And you write about those people, and there are heroes and heroines of the time, because the risk they took to their families, to their personal safety, to their health, their well-being is simply extraordinary in reading.
Yes.
And I'm going to say to everyone out there, especially every LGBTQ plus member of our community and allies, read this book. It is very, very important for to know what you come out of and to know your heroes and heroines and the true story of our history. Because as I have said often, if you don't know where you came out of, then you're nothing. But if you know your noble in history, then you're somebody. And these people made us somebody. And James, you could not have written this better. It could not have been told better. There's nothing sensationalistic about it, but you're riveted to the story. And you've renewed it in me, who knew a lot of these people, new respect and some question marks. I will never be able to look at Averill Harriman the same way. And nor should I. So this book, it's a link. Buy it. It's essential. And James, you have given us a gift that I haven't enjoyed so much in a long time, and we owe you. What's next?
I have lots of ideas. I haven't settled on one yet, but you'll be the first to know, David.
Okay. Come back and visit when you do know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And we'll let people know if they can help you or not.
Thank you
very much. I'm really thrilled that you came and visited us. Buy this book, folks. Peace to y'all.
Thank you, David. That was really wonderful. And I really